It's the first Monday in May, 2019. The theme is camp, notes on fashion. We're at the Met Gala. Zendaya arrives. She's in a powder blue Tommy Hilfiger gown, corseted bodice, tulle skirt, exaggerated sleeves. Her hair is pulled back with a matching headband, a simple black choker circling her neck. It's an exciting reference to the animated original, almost aggressively faithful. Her fairy godmother steps onto the carpet. He waves a wand spewing stage smoke. And in front of the camera, her dress starts to glow. First at the hem, then the bodice, then the entire thing. It's camp, it's theater, but it's also strategy. Having gotten her big break on Disney Channel with the show Shake It Up, at this point in her career, Zendaya is still very much seen as a Disney girl. Even with Spider-Man and The Greatest Showman under her belt, she was more often praised for her fashion. A red carpet darling, yes, but not widely taken seriously as a real actress just yet. Hollywood saw her as fashionable, beautiful, bankable even, but nowhere close to the global superstar she's seen as today. So she played into it. She played the ingenue so perfectly that we couldn't help but pay attention to her, giving the audience what they expected, but she made it impossible to dismiss her. And then she did something very subtle. As she stands in the steps, she leaves her glass slipper behind. An obvious, genius, direct reference to the Disney fairy tale, but also, I think, a direct message. This moment was about Zendaya owning the perception people had of her, but also about shedding it, about claiming authorship over her own narrative, about turning an archetype, the ingenue, the Disney princess, into a launch pad. And in a mere few months, our perception of her will completely change with the airing of the hit show Euphoria. At this moment, Zendaya was both playing the part that we expected of her, but also in the process of rewriting the script. And beside her stands her fairy godmother, Laura Roach, her stylist, her image architect. So in this video, I want to break down how Zendaya and Laura Roach have quietly redefined what it means to be a fashion icon, not just through their various very glamorous red carpet moments, but through strategy and storytelling. And before I continue, while you're here, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps my channel, and drop a comment to let me know what your favorite Zendaya fashion moment is. Also, if you like these kind of fashion evolutions, I have a playlist dedicated to them. So please check that out after this one, of course. And with that, let's get into it. So it's no surprise that one of the most radical things Zendaya and Laura Roach have done together is completely reframe how we view and talk about the press tour. They love a good method dressing moment. Method dressing is fashion's answer to method acting, where actors promote a film or project dressing in a way that heavily correlates with the projects that they are promoting. Whether that be through color or specific motifs, or in some cases, direct recreations of outfits their character might have worn, the whole press cycle becomes an extension of the world on screen. And Zendaya and Laura Roach have become one of the biggest proponents of this method of promoting a project. I feel like the first moment they started leaning into this was during the Greatest Showman press tour in 2017. Across the press run, Zendaya and Laura really told a visual story with silhouette. And the palette, of course, being black and deep red, it was very circus coded without being too kitschy. I love the use of the butterfly motif. There was something very symbolic about this to me, especially with the now iconic monarch butterfly gown she wore to the Sydney premiere, designed by Moschino. The dress had wings, and it felt like a visual metaphor for Zendaya mid-transformation, shedding her Disney shell and stepping into something more cinematic. And that's what method dressing really is for. They use it not necessarily in an aesthetic way, but it's about authorship, about storytelling, and about, I think, control. And they've kept using that same approach ever since, tailoring every press cycle into its own distinct world. For Space Jam, they played into nostalgia and sports, remixing athletic motifs with luxury silhouettes, and obviously that iconic color palette. It was playful, cartoonish, but still very high fashion. It matched the tone of the movie without feeling like cosplay, if that makes sense. And I think that we can all agree that they took things to a completely different level parallel with Dune. For Dune Part 1, Zendaya had very little on-screen time, but you wouldn't have thought that with the way that the movie was marketed and promoted, and that really extends to the press tour. She showed up to press events in looks that were some of the most beautiful I have ever seen on her. Very futuristic in terms of the materials and the silhouettes, and by Dune Part 2, her outfits got even more layered and elevated. Who can forget the metal robot suit that Laura was able to pull from the Mugler archives? Each look was very architectural, earth tones, these very armored motifs, and also regal silhouettes. It reads as being very much about power and legacy and myth-making. The Spider-Man press tours were where the formula was really perfected. Homecoming was a lot of very casual and kind of streetwear-inspired outfits, and No Way Home was high concept, much more glamorous. Each tour became a fashion arc of its own, which I really love. She's never in costume, she's in conversation with the character. And most recently with Challengers, the method dressing was at its best, in my opinion. The looks were athletic, but also so seductive and more grown up. They lean into tennis whites. The tailoring was very close to the body, and she wore a lot of bold neons. Each look teased the themes of the movie. This is what makes Laura Roach's fashion strategy for Zendaya so distinct. It's never just about what looks good. It's about crafting an image that holds weight alongside the story she's trying to tell on screen. But to really understand how they're able to work so well together, I feel like we have to go all the way back to the beginning, before the press tours, before the Met Gala, before she was the fashion icon that she is today. Back to a shopping mall in 2011, Zendaya was just 14 when she met Laura Roach. She had started on Disney Channel as the co-lead on the show Shake It Up. She was young, still doing her own makeup, her own styling. There was no glam squad. Just a teenager who needed an outfit for the Justin Bieber Never Say Never red carpet. And so her team reached out to a stylist from Chicago, still known for owning his own vintage boutique on the South Side. Laura Roach remembers it clearly. Given full creative freedom and a credit card from Zendaya's father, he took her shopping. They landed on a shimmery, metallic Alice and Olivia blazer, paired with this patent leather, grayish, bluish miniskirt, stacked necklaces, and opaque tights. Something just clicked between them. Zendaya felt seen, and Laura saw all the possibilities of what their creative collaboration could bring, and they've been working together ever since. At the time, neither of them had real fashion industry backing. Zendaya was considered too young, too Disney. Law, a black stylist who didn't have access to major fashion houses. So designers weren't really lining up to send Zendaya many clothes, but Laura Roach wasn't deterred. In fact, he used the nose as fuel. He started going into vintage archives, styling Zendaya in pieces that seemed maybe unexceptional to some, and especially different as what you would expect to see on a young Disney starlet. Laura Roach calls himself an image architect for a reason. He has this way of crafting mythology around his client. With Zendaya, he understood the need to challenge perception, and he saw her ambition. The girl the industry had labeled cute and safe was capable of so much more, but he didn't rush the transformation. He leaned into the narrative. They slowly, painstakingly built a version of Zendaya that Hollywood could understand, but always stayed one step ahead. They pulled from old Hollywood, from black icons, from camp, from theater, and made it all feel new. By the time Spider-Man Homecoming hit theaters in 2017, Zendaya wasn't just surprising people, she was outdressing the entire cast, in my opinion. And with Euphoria in the latter half of 2019, she finally broke through that lost glass ceiling. Her performance as Rue was heartbreaking and raw and vulnerable, completely opposite to her public, polished persona, and critics noticed. She won an Emmy at 24, the youngest ever in her category, and then she won again. And what followed was an era of true cultural dominance. Each look became more sculpted, more referential, and a lot more symbolic. Those big brands that declined to dress her in the earlier years of her career were now clamoring for attention, and Laura Roach and Zendaya weren't necessarily looking to give it to them. Meanwhile, Law, always just behind her on the carpet, became a character in the mythology too. He wasn't just the man picking clothes, he was very much her shadow, her fairy godmother, the mastermind quietly pulling the strings. His presence was as iconic as the looks he created, with his sharp suits and the crispest white shirts. dreads, and of course the bust-down middle part. Law Roach is a legend all in his own right. Fans and fashion lovers started watching for him just as much as they were watching for Zendaya, knowing that wherever he went, something unforgettable was about to happen. He became a symbol of creative power behind the scene, and in some ways the architect of Zendaya's rise. Together they built a star, and they did it on their own terms. I think it's clear that from the beginning, Law Roach saw Zendaya not just as a client or a project, but as a collaborator and a muse. There seems to be a lot of trust between the two, which means that they can take risks without hesitation. Zendaya clearly gives Law a lot of creative freedom, and he pushes her into places that she might not enter alone. This trust lets them weave together fashion, identity, and culture into looks that feel authentic and also so different and inventive. There's a kind of unspoken language between them. Law knows exactly how to translate Zendaya's evolving ambitions into visuals that resonate deeply on the red carpet. In my opinion, they have redefined what a young Black woman in Hollywood can look like and represent. Like, I think back to something as simple as the incident with the locks. In 2015, Zendaya attended the Oscars wearing a white Vivienne Westwood gown and faux locks. A look that felt so elegant, especially at a time when we weren't being bombarded with so many iterations of this same Vivienne Westwood dress. This particular silhouette and bodice has had a huge resurgence in the last few years, especially around 2020 to 2022. But at this time, it was a lot fresher. And having not been an adult in the 90s, and at this time I don't think I had seen the first Sex and the City movie, so it felt new to me. However, that night, it wasn't the dress that caused the stir, it was her hairstyle. The choice to wear her hair in locks was meaningful to Zendaya. She later explained that locks were, in part, a tribute to her father, who wears his hair in this way. It was a nod to her roots culturally and personally, presented on one of the most mainstream, white-centric stages in entertainment. But instead of recognizing the depth and beauty of that choice, E! News host Juliana Rancic made a comment that sparked widespread outrage. On Fashion Police, she said of Zendaya's looks,
"Had it. I think she's such a tiny frame that this hair to me overwhelms her. Like, I feel like she smells like patchouli oil." Or weed. Yeah, maybe weed.
The subtext was obvious that wearing locks, a protective, deeply cultural Black hairstyle, was associated with being unclean or even drug adjacent. It played into long-standing stereotypes that have been weaponized against Black people for decades, especially Black women and girls, the kind of microaggression that many of us were already painfully familiar with. I, of course, at the time was a huge fan of Fashion Police, and I remember watching this live. I was around 16 or 17 when this happened, old enough to understand exactly what was being said and what it meant. At that age, I had always worn braided hairstyles, box braids, cornrows, twists, you name it. And like many Black girls who've grown up in predominantly white schools and environments, I was used to being asked endless questions about my hair. Is it all yours? How long does it take? Can I touch it? Or sometimes worse, the side eyes, microaggressive comments about how I care for my hair. Our hair was always a topic, always politicized, always misunderstood. So to see Zendaya, who was only 18 at the time, not just wear locks on the Oscar red carpet, but also respond intelligently, powerfully, and gracefully to the backlash, felt honestly monumental to me. She took to Instagram and wrote, "There's already harsh criticisms of African American hair in society without the help of ignorant people who choose to judge others based on the curls of their hair. My wearing my hair in locks on the Oscar red carpet was to showcase them in a positive light, to remind people of color that our hair is good enough." That post went viral for a reason. I think sometimes when you're in these environments, you don't always want to speak up for yourself or kind of shake the table too much, especially as a young Black girl alone in these situations. That moment felt so affirming and made me feel like it was okay to speak up about things like that. And her response marked a cultural shift in how young Black women in Hollywood, and by extension girls like me, could assert our presence. And behind that moment was her longtime stylist, Law Roach. Law is not just her stylist, but her image architect. He's in charge of her entire glam squad. He also encouraged her to take risks, and in turn, she trusted him to elevate her identity and not erase it. This relationship relationship and their approach to styling Zendaya matters because they have fundamentally shifted who holds power and who gets to be the author of their own narrative. Too often, stylists are invisible, but Law and Zendaya flip the script, making styling a form of authorship. Their work challenges traditional gatekeeping in fashion and Hollywood. By reclaiming and curating her image so meticulously, Zendaya asserts herself over how Black femininity is seen and valued, demanding complexity and nuance rather than stereotypes. This really brings home the idea that fashion isn't frivolous, but a serious form of storytelling. Beyond that, they have built a blueprint for future artists and creatives about the importance of intentionality and having vision behind every public moment. To me, it just shows how image making can be a revolutionary act and how it's crucial for Black creatives to own those narratives if they want lasting influence. Zendaya wasn't handed couture off the runway at 18. Law wasn't someone groomed by Vogue or Condé Nast. They were outsiders, and that meant that they had to build their own system. In those early years, when the designers weren't handing Zendaya their newest gown, Law turned that into a power play. Instead of brand new runway exclusives, Zendaya wore pieces that had already been worn by sometimes bigger names and made them hers. This wasn't them just being lazy or copying. The intention was to get them on those who wore it better lists and to get her to the position where she was being talked about in fashion. This careful reframing of perception was the foundation for everything after. Law saw the difference between that Disney girl everyone expected her to be and the woman Zendaya was destined to be. But I love that they didn't rush to shed that safe image, which is something that I've seen many other of her contemporaries do and has often led to a lot of widespread backlash. Instead, they played with the expectation, they flipped it, and they made it a launch pad. That slow burn transformation made her eventual breakthrough feel inevitable and earned. What's also key is Law Roach's obsession with cultural and fashion history. He doesn't just pick a dress because it's pretty, he chooses it because it carries a meaning. Take that glowing Cinderella dress, for example. It was a spectacle, yes, but also a layered symbol about rewriting Disney fairy tales and transformation, and also very much a last hurrah of being able to see Zendaya as a Disney princess just months before Euphoria was scheduled to air. Or take the vintage YSL couture dress, once owned by founder of Ebony Fashion Fair, Eunice Johnson, that Zendaya wore on the Essence Black Women in Hollywood red carpet. It was a tribute, a nod to the Black woman who built fashion platforms in a world that refused to see them. And by wearing it at an event designed to celebrate Black women, Zendaya was stepping into her own legacy and quietly reminding everyone that she knows exactly whose shoulders she stands on. It also positioned her, and by extension Law Roach, as a steward of history, someone who understands that style can carry memory and meaning and message. Moments like that are what pushed her beyond just being stylish into being significant. But Law's vision goes beyond clothes. He treats every look like a full performance, factoring in how Zendaya moves, poses, and inhabits the outfit. That theatricality is part of what makes her red carpet moments feel unforgettable. People always question why Law Roach is even on the carpet. It's because on the carpet, he is her director. Each appearance is approached cinematically. The silhouette, the mood, to the moment that she steps out of the car, it's all planned with intention. He's thinking not just about the garment, but about the experience and how it will move and how it will photograph. The red carpet in their hands becomes a stage. Zendaya's presence on it is choreographed, not improvised. For the Dune Part 2 press tour, Law Roach revealed that he timed everything down to the minute, literally choreographing Zendaya's walk with diagrams and mapped out steps. They weren't hoping for that viral shot, they engineer it every single time. And that's been the through line through their entire career together. Zendaya's journey, guided by Law Roach's vision, shows us that fashion is a language and a tool for rewriting stories and reclaiming power, and a blueprint for how young Black women, and really anyone that can shape their own legacy on their own terms. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Please like and subscribe, and of course comment your thoughts. I'd love to hear from you. And as always, thank you so much for watching and staying with me to the end of the video. Since you're here, you might as well subscribe, and I'll see you in my next one.